Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk. First of all, first things first, I want to wish my friend and co-host Lisa. Today is her birthday, so um, on here, wishing Lisa a happy birthday, Lisa, and many more. You you know that, as you guys know, Lisa is my co-host here, and she contributes to a great many videos, a variety of videos, especially about a topic like this that is female centric, if you will, about um, something in pop culture that is centered around a female narrative. And this topic today definitely is. It is about the 2013 I mean, excuse me, 2023 remake of the 1989 classic The Little Mermaid. We started off on this channel talking about Disney live action remakes, and we're giving our thoughts on this channel and other videos about different live action remakes. I would have wore the same green shirt that I wore in the first video on this channel, but couldn't find it. So here it is. Recently at the recent Disney Expo, there was the trailer of the new Little Mermaid film starring Haley Bailey, and there was a immediate reaction to this that was negative among people that had grown up with the film, the original 1989 animated version. And there was an also positive reaction because Haley Bailey is an African American actress. And many people felt, well, it's not staying true to the original version, the 1989 version, in which Ariel was white. They tried to mask their bigotry by claiming that it was because her hair wasn't fire engine red. But some people that were less fake and less phony actually came out and said, look, the reason why we don't like this film, we don't like this trailer, is because the actress is black and the cartoon is white. But other people tried to insult your intelligence by telling you that the reason why they didn't like it because the freaking um, fire engine red hair, and this is a different shade of red, and his dreadlocks, dreads instead of long flowing blonde hair. I mean, the red hair. But here's my thoughts on it. And full disclosure, in the 1980s, I loved this movie, The Little Mermaid. And even though it wasn't really intended for me and I wasn't really the target audience, me being a boy, um, this was a classic film. If you have female cousins, you have sisters, and whatever growing up, you watch this film a lot. But one thing that always connected me to this film and inspired me in this film to love this film is the song Part of Your World. As many people know, as you can see with my wheelchair in the back, I grew up as a disabled person. I grew up sometimes feeling ostracized and feeling discriminated against and closed off and different from other people in society. So the movies in pop culture that connected to me were perceived as, pieces of pop culture that were perceived as, you know, telling stories about outsiders, telling stories about people that were outcasts and misfits and people that were different. And one of those stories was The Little Mermaid. Because she is born a mermaid and because she is born different, she, in that song, Part of Your World, struggles with trying to assimilate, trying to become part of the world of the mortal beings. So, my point is, not necessarily does a character have to, and I didn't look anything like the drawing of Ariel. One, I was a boy. Two, I didn't have red hair. And three, I was, Hispanic. And a minority. So I didn't look anything like the character. So people that are saying, well, you got to look like the character in order for the character to connect with you, that's complete bullshit. I don't think you have to look necessarily like a character, and the character has to reflect you in order for you to connect with it. But I don't mind the change. I feel like we're living in a different era, and Disney is trying to go, of course, for a different demographic that was often neglected. Would I have liked to seen an original story other than a story that's already written, something that is written for, you know, a new original character other than Ariel and other than a remake? Sure, I would have loved to seen that. Something that's written just for girls, little girls of color, just uniquely for them. I would have loved to seen it, but Disney, unfortunately, they don't have any more originality. They don't create new stories. They just take their old stories and remake live action versions of it or different versions of it. We saw it with Star Wars. That was one of the big complaints that George Lucas himself had with Star Wars, was they didn't create anything new with The Force Awakens. They just created the basic plot of A New Hope and just called it something else with different characters. And Disney doesn't want to really take those kind of chances and really create something new and something different and something innovative, something even derivative. There's an animated version of a mermaid from the Ivory Coast that um, was a black mermaid that they could have spun off and created something new and something different. But we're working with what we got, and we know that Disney is out of ideas. So we're in the context of working with what we got. We already have, and we know they don't really want to take chances and create new, different movies and new, different stories. They rather go with established brands because that's what international markets like China respond to. We know they're going to go with the original, so why not try to tweak it in some way to make it something different? Because we already have the animated version, we already have that white version, so why not try something a little bit different? Trying something different never hurt nobody. Lisa says talking about the hair was code for what they can't say. I wanna I wanted to say when it come out the racist, so I'm gonna say if the hair is not red, it's not Ariel. Yeah, she wants to. In other words, Lisa's trying to say that uh they don't want to come outright and say that they don't want to do it because it's a black character, even though some groups on Facebook that are anonymous private groups are pretty bold with saying that the reason why they're not going to like this film is because it's a black character. Some are actually bold. Some people are actually outright saying, well, Ariel is white and you can't change the race of the character. But again, just like I said in 2015 with my other original channel, my first channel, my old channel started, my first video that I ever did on my channel was about the Star Wars Force Awakens trailer when this first started to be a real issue. Finn takes off his stormtrooper mask and he reveals that it's a black guy, and all of a sudden you saw this flood of this internet flooding with memes and complaints that Star Wars was taking what quote unquote white people out of movies, out of fantasy movies, and putting, black characters, LGBT characters, and we saw this with Beauty and the Beast. When LeFou was hinted as a gay character, we saw this even with the Buzz Lightyear movie that just came out. It flopped because there was an LGBT kind of character and influence in it. So when Disney is trying to be more inclusive with race and sexuality and other types of representation, because they feel like they want to capitalize on that and get those kind of dollars, you get this kind of backlash against it. And even though movies like the Buzz Lightyear movie that make a big deal out of it, or even the Beauty and the Beast movie, that made a big deal out of it. The audience that was the social justice audience, they were played for fools because the LeFou and Gaston part didn't even make it to the final cut, and the Buzz Lightyear thing, that was so far in the back that nobody could see it. You know what I'm saying? So they want you to think that they're doing something social justice like, but at the same time, they're and with the Finn character in the Force Awakens, we all know that the Finn character was notoriously misused and downplayed, and he was put in the back of the poster in the Chinese version of the Force Awakens, and we were made out to seem like the first trailer that he was going to be the main character, that he was going to be the new Luke Skywalker, that he was going to be a Jedi, and it turns out he was not. He was not a Jedi, and he was not that. It turns out the racists and the sexists and the Republican crowd, going back to again politics, um, were mad anyway because Rey was the main character and they didn't want a woman in the Jedi role. Lisa brings up a good point. They should have gotten a drag queen to play Ursula, considering Ursula was inspired by the drag queen Divine, which I told a lot of people when I first found this new that out, and people didn't want to believe me, but that is a well-known fact. The drag queen Divine was the inspiration for Ursula, so maybe they should have gotten a drag queen character. That would have been awesome, just to piss those people off. Because again, everything is political now. Everything is politicized to the point, NFL games, Disney movies, and everything. So they're trying to get a more inclusive audience. They're trying to include all kinds of young people, LGBT, young people of color. The father is Javier Bardem, who played in the Lucy the Lucy movie that we did the review on this channel in the archives, and he's Hispanic, so they're really trying to go for that minority audience when it comes to that. But people that are going off at the off the rails and saying, well, what about what about um, the red-haired people? This is what Candace Owens, our friend Candace Owens, said in a video clip that I sent Lisa just today. She said, "Well, what about the red-haired people? What about the red-haired girls or whatever?" Listen, they have the movie, the 2012 Pixar movie Brave, and they have the original version of the movie. If you don't like this version, listen, don't watch this version. Watch the other version, but don't take away other people's enjoyment, other people's joy from seeing this version and experiencing this version as their own. And it might just turn out that little Caucasian boys and girls may just see themselves in the Ariel character because, again, I loved the movie when I was a kid, and the character, the animation didn't necessarily reflect me as a boy and as a person of color, so, or as a non redhead or anything like that. The story is what people respond to. The story is what people identify with. The story is what people are drawn to. This idea that the character has to look like you and be like you in order for you to connect with it, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? To say that little white kids and white boys and girls can't connect to this character because it's not a white character, that's crazy. You know what I mean? There are little boys and girls that connect to Jasmine. There are little boys and girls that connect to Aladdin. There are little boys and girls that connect to Mufasa, to Simba. Characters that were written from an ethnic perspective, even back in the day in the Disney Renaissance. And there are characters that connect to Princess and the Frog. That nobody had a problem really with Princess and the Frog. Nobody really cared so much about that, even though the original tale from that, the original fairy tale, was a Caucasian character and it was written from an African American point of view. So, and people love Pocahontas, and they weren't necessarily Native American. You know what I mean? So just because the character is a different race doesn't mean really anything. And like Lisa's saying, Ariel is not a real character. In fact, there is no character named Ariel in the original 1837 version the of the book by Hans Christian Andersen. That's a complete made up version by the 1980s Disney movie. So people that are saying, well, it's a staple of the story, it's part of the story is Danish. First of all, the book is written in Danish, but that doesn't. Hans Christian Andersen didn't say that Ariel has to be Danish. Here's the difference. People say, well, what if you did that with? What if you did that with, um, say, you you did it with Aladdin, right? If you made Aladdin, who's a well, let's get that first thing straight. First of all, the original story of Aladdin in the Arabian Nights, um, the original version, which the movie is based on, is a Chinese character. In the Islamic part of China, granted Uyghurstan, aka the Ninjan province, but he's a Chinese character, so his ethnicity was already changed in the movie. But the point is that if you made the live action version of Aladdin, the 2019 version of Aladdin, with somebody of a different race that wasn't Middle Eastern, that would change the components of the story. Because even though the original character was Chinese, it was done in an Islamic milieu. If you made Simba, let's say, even though the voice of Simba was Jonathan Taylor Thomas and it was a white kid and it sounded like a white kid in the movie, if you made him in a live action version, well, let's say the Broadway play version, because the live action version was animals, CG animals, right? But if you made him not African and you made him not Swahili, right, not East African, that would change a component of who Simba is as a character. But changing Ariel's race, making Ariel from a white mermaid to a black mermaid, or let's use the racist the non-racist coded language you want to use. Say, okay, you made her not Danish. Her being Danish doesn't add or subtract anything to her character. In fact, her ethnicity is completely irrelevant in the story. It's about mermaids. Mermaids are not real, and if mermaids were real, they wouldn't be um, particular to one ethnicity or another because the ocean covers the entire earth. So mermaids could technically live in any environment, right? They don't have they're animals without legs and just female upper bodies. If anything, they appeal to uh, male fantasies about women, right? Male sexist fantasies rooted in the 19th century about women. And that was one of the criticisms that Pamela Travers, had towards Hans Christian Andersen's version, was that she felt that Hans Christian Andersen's version, in her version of the story, and even this has been a criticism about the 1989 version, that the story really doesn't empower women in any way. Here you have Ariel willing to give all up her kingdom and give all up her species, what makes her unique for a man. This is really Victorian, um, 19th century male sexist viewpoints really being expressed. You know what I mean? Here she is ready to throw her whole life away on a man. If anything, if you want to really look into social messaging, take the whole race and ethnicity thing out of it, and you really have a story of a girl who is highly irresponsible. And in the book version, it's even worse because in the book version, she goes through excruciating pain, sharp knives in her legs as she becomes, a human because she falls in love with this prince who in the book is actually unnamed. And she actually dies. She dissolves into foam because of her misgivings. So, if anything, guys, this appeals to a more conservative sensibility, both of the 1980s and of the 19th century Victorian age. So, um, if they really wanted to stick it to the original writer and really take a shit on the story, they would make Ariel give up her mermaid status for something more noble. And they'll make her more feminist and more independent, like they did with, say, the character Frozen. In Frozen, the girl in Frozen, she doesn't have a mate. She doesn't have um, a man, a husband, unlike any other Disney princess in the entire world. Now, if they did that, you could say, well, they're changing a major component. But here, they're not really changing anything. All they're changing is the race. So if you have a problem with this, then you obviously have a problem with black people. You don't want to see a black woman portray her, and you feel like colors should come into play when casting a fictional character like a mermaid. Now, I've seen a couple of stupid ass memes by a couple of conservatives saying, well, we're going to change the race of um, Martin Luther King to Mel Gibson, and we're going to have Brad Pitt starring in a remake of Malcolm X, or somebody starring in a remake of Juice or whatever. First of all, Juice can't even be thrown in that because, again, um, that is a work of fiction as well. But to throw Malcolm X and Martin Luther King into that in that comparison, that's a false comparison because those are real guys. Those are real people. Those are real historical figures. And changing the race of those historical figures would change who they are and what they meant. You know, like if you made Harriet Tubman a white woman or a Latina woman, then it would change a component of who Harriet Tubman was and why she existed and why she did what she did. You know, and even a fictional story like Juice, if you made it, say, with Mark Wahlberg in it, and you made a version of that with Mark Wahlberg instead of Tupac, swap, say, or John Cena instead of Tupac, right? It would change a component of what that character was and why that character, what that character's motivation to doing what he did. He did it to not only escape um, being bullied by the guy Radames, but also to escape a cycle of poverty that was existing for urban communities of color in the 1980s. But changing Ariel's race doesn't impact the story at all. Why we love Ariel is not because she was white, but because of what she represented as far as being an outsider and being different and wanting to be accepted. What I think the original intention behind part of this world, part of your world, right? The song, why I loved it was not that she wanted to be part of the world to um, fall in love with Prince Eric, like wasn't, was became her intention later, but just that she wanted to be accepted. And I thought a better ending of the story would have been where she becomes a mermaid again and she comes to terms with being a mermaid and she accepts her differences rather than trying to fit in with everyone else. So I think, in a way, if you're against this new interpretation, then you're actually against what the spirit of the Little Mermaid really was. And that is inclusiveness, that is acceptance, that is assimilation. You know, and as I became older and as I analyzed the movie even more, I feel like what her intention was behind that song, the story moved away from that because then it just became about, you know, falling in love with Prince Eric. But in uh, the original, Yeah, Lisa says, and to see little black girls uh, seeing an Ariel that looks like them is like seeing Black Panther to boys. I I think that's true, Lisa. But again, my opinion is the difference was that um, Black Panther was an original character, so nobody could sit there and say that okay, nobody could denigrate it. My fear with this movie is that people will just turn around and say, well, that's not the real version of Ariel. This is the real version of Ariel, and say, well, their version, the white version, is the real version, quote unquote, and they'll just downgrade this. If Disney had taken the time, in my opinion, to create something original, something that nobody else could lay claim to having a version of, something that was totally made for black little girls in the way that Black Panther was made for black little boys, that would have been better because nobody else had a version like that. Nobody else had something like that. Nobody else could say, well, this is a cheap knockoff or a cheap imitation. Nobody else could say, well, okay, that's just a wannabe version or that's just a lesser than version. You know what I mean? Because okay, y'all might got Ariel, but we got Princess whatever. You know what I mean? Something different. You know what I mean? Something uniquely original, something uniquely their own. Not an imitation. Right, right. It might be, but Lisa says we only saw 30 seconds of the trailer. The plot might be something totally different than the original. Yeah, but I'm saying if it is like the original version, I get what you're saying. That it's something for little children to look up to. But the fact of the matter is that some of the people that are arguing against this, some of the people that are hardened against this and hardened racist against this, are people, men and women, without children. I mean, what do you care if the mermaid is black or white? You say because it doesn't reflect your childhood. Well, listen, if you don't like this version and you like the original version, watch the original version. If you want to give this version a chance, give this version a chance. You know what I'm saying? But it's not made for you. You're not a child anymore. You're an adult. But the problem again is this whole nostalgia market and the fact that movies don't have adult options anymore. So every movie that people go to see, other than the movie that I'm going to see tomorrow, The Woman King, which is based on actual history of the uh, women warriors of Dahomey, starring Viola Davis, um, is based on some kind of animated or some kind of childlike version of a movie. So, uh, like back in the 80s, the 90s, and even the 2000s, adults wouldn't even cared about shit like this. You know what I mean? Because they had their own options. They had their own other movies that were R rated, PG-13 rated, that were made for adults. You had movies, romantic comedies, chick flicks, so quote unquote, that were made for women. You had movies that were made for grown men, like Rocky or The Terminator, and movies that were made for grown men and women. You know what I mean? But everything now is so centered on this child stuff, and everything is remakes that Hollywood has completely run out of ideas. Now they got to remake the old originals and piss off a segment of their fan base. Yeah, Lisa says, and that's another thing. Lisa says our generation has said about this version. Um, is this what we've been reduced to as adults? We're actually sitting here while the world is crumbling around us. We are sitting here while inflation continues to happen, while Russia continues to invade the Ukraine, while the whole world crumbles around us, and we continue to have the fallout from COVID in 2020 and 2021. The whole world is crumbling upon us and coming apart at it seems, and we're sitting here arguing about a make believe fish, a make believe fictional creature in a movie that was made over 30 years ago. It is being remade now for new generations to experience it. That's what you are concerned about. That's what you care about. That's what you feel so vehemently about. That's what you argue about as adults. And you might say that's hypocritical because why the hell am I making a video about it? But I'm praising it. I'm saying that it's something that kids should go see. That they should, parents should take their kids to see it. But if you are a childless adult in your 30s or 40s and you don't have kids and you don't, and you first of all, if you have kids, even if you have nieces and nephews, they're gonna go. They want to go see it, regardless of who is the race in it, because kids generally don't think about things like that. But if you don't have that, and you're not in touch with your nieces or nephews, or have any kids in your family, what do you care that the Little Mermaid is being remade with a black actress? If that's what you care about, if that's your concern, if that's what these political pundits like Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro are addressing, then the world is indeed in a sad state, ladies and gentlemen, because grown adult men and women are actually having a fit and having a conniption fit about a freaking fictional character, a fictional creature, skin color. I mean, in a movie that was made over 30 years ago that's just being remade now, in a trailer that they saw 30 seconds of, and they have no idea what the plot is going to actually be. Get a life, move out of your mom's basement, and do something with yourself that is productive. Yeah, I mean, yeah, at least since they're mad because they have dread slash braids. Yeah, I mean, but if that's what you're, again, it's just like with the Super Bowl. Remember in the Super Bowl this past year when they had Dre and Snoop and everybody was like, oh, how dare they have rap music? How dare they have vulgarity in the Super Bowl performance and embrace people like Eminem and people like Snoop and people like Dre? Get over yourself. It's a changing world. And if you don't change with it, either evolve or die. If you don't like the way the world is changing, you don't like the sea of change in the world and the diversity in the world, get over yourself, smell the grass, and really, you're an adult, you're a grown ass adult. It's like I always say with wrestling and Star Wars, and this goes under that same rubric. It's made for children. It is not made for you. If you don't like it, don't watch it, but don't ruin everybody else's fun. This is not a movie. This is a movie for 5, 6, 7 year olds. It's children of all ages, yes, just like with wrestling and just like with Star Wars, children of all ages. But when it doesn't suit your agenda or when it doesn't suit what you remember when you were a kid, there's nothing you can do about it because you're not a kid anymore. Of course, you're not going to see it with the same eyes. Of course, you're not going to see it with the same innocence that you saw it when you first saw it because it's not made for you. It is made for children. It is made for the innocence of children. And do not sit here and try to corrupt the innocence of children with a racist agenda. Listen, you want to watch movies that are all white? Watch movies from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even the 2000s. I guarantee you, every Disney movie up until the 90s, up until Aladdin, basically, was filled with nothing but all white people. I guarantee it. I know it to be true. Okay, yeah, the Jungle Book had Mowgli. Okay, but that was about it. you know, up until Aladdin, that's what made Aladdin special. That's what made Aladdin different. And what also made Aladdin different was the first movie Disney movie made for boys. But again, if this is Prince and the Frog was the first black one, but the first movie of color ever was Aladdin in 1990. Um, uh, no, 1992. Sorry, made with Middle Easterners. And like I said, the Jungle Book. But that had one human character. One, two, if you count the girl that Mowgli later ran into. Trust me, I might not know as much about Disney as other people, but I know quite a bit about Disney's history. And Walt Disney, Walter Elias Disney, in fact, was a racist. And he once saw a dark skinned Indian animator drawing in his office and demanded that he be fired. He was, in fact, anti Semitic. That's just a true statement. That was the time that he grew up in. He grew up in Missouri. So, of course, Missouri, just like everywhere else in America, small minded and racist, but even more so in a state like Missouri, that despite being a Union state during the Civil War, was in fact a slave state, one of the few in the Midwest. So he was a product of his time, and he didn't want animators of color, and he didn't want Jewish animators even in his employ. That just his racism and his presidential prejudicial views, his anti-Semitism is just a part of Disney's legacy. That the Walt Disney, the man's legacy, that the Walt Disney Company doesn't want to come to terms with. Just like they compare it to the WWE, there are parts of Vince McMahon's legacy that the WWE doesn't want to come to terms with. Also, his racism and his xenophobia and his sexism is a huge part of it. But he's the founder of the company, and the company is his vision. Nobody can take away what they achieved in terms of their entrepreneurial spirit in the American history, and taking their particular medium, Disney's case animation, in Vince's case wrestling, to the next level. But again, they they participate and they make these sorts of entertainments for children. And hopefully, now that Disney is long dead, right? Hopefully now we can have more diversity in Disney, because there are children of all races in the world, and Disney wants to represent all people around the world, and that's the point of being more inclusive. You know, what I mean? You're saying you people are sitting here saying that it represents the great replacement theory. You're buying into the propaganda of the mass shooter in Philadelphia in that supermarket. So you're trying to tie everything in, and you're corrupting the innocence of a children's movie, the innocence of children's messaging. Again, it's for children of all ages, but it is for children. You have to approach it with a child's mindset, a child's heart, as the late Michael Jackson would have said, and when he in fact did say in one of his songs with that same name. So you can, like, and Candace Owens is sometimes she talks sense, but a lot of times she just panders. Lisa says there need to be a a Latina princess. Yeah, there is in fact no, well, Encanto. I guess that's considered Disney now. But in terms of the classic Disney fairy tales, there has never been any sort of Disney movie that's set in Latin America, and there should have been, because again, Disney was is a vision. If you go to the Disney studios, you'll see that there is people of all ethnicities there, people of all races there. It's not just lily white anymore. You know, and that's the world we live in. It's not just lily white anymore. You have Latinos, you have Asians, you have Middle Easterners, you have Black people. You have a whole plethora of races and ethnicities being represented. in Disney. So if you don't like it, don't watch Disney. Or if you watch the old movies or watch the movies with just animals, like Robin Hood, Prince and Thieves, or the original Lion King. Don't ruin the fun for everybody else. People want to be included, and people are being included. But you choose to pick your battles in weird places. You know, pick your battles for more economic opportunities for white Americans in poor, impoverished places like the Southeast or the Appalachian Mountains. Pick your battles in other areas. There are other areas. There are things more important in life than the race or the color of a fictional character. I mean, really get over it. You make it sound juvenile and childish arguing about such BS. You know, okay, you don't like it, don't watch it. But I guarantee your kid will beg you to watch it if you have kids. And if you don't have kids, why do you care? Anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. And remember, it is a small world after all. Peace.